Hello, and welcome to Compelling Conversations. I'm Dara Rosenbaum, an attorney at Rosenbaum and Taylor in New York. I'm a business owner myself. My own experience as a business owner has shown me how much I can learn from other people's experiences, whether from their failures or from their successes or from their mistakes. And that's what led me to start this show. My goal each week is to have a compelling conversation with a business owner, business leader, or other inspiring person who can share with you their thoughts, their experiences, and their advice. And I'm sure you'll be as inspired by them as I am. You can find this show anywhere you find your podcasts, and we look forward to sharing all this experience with you. So my guest today is Phyllis Weiss Haserot, and Phyllis is the president and founder of the Practice Development Council. And I'm going to read this so I make sure that I get this right. Phyllis has been working for over 25 years as a visionary business development and organizational effectiveness strategist, speaker, facilitator, author, and coach. Her special focus is on improving the working relationships among the 4 or 5 generations in the workplace, and that results in more client attraction, retention, succession planning, and knowledge transfer and productivity, and ultimately leads to greater profitability. So we're going to have Phyllis share that and so much more today. Phyllis, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Dara. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, I mean, there's so much richness in your background and in what you do. So just if you give us a little bit more information about what it is and what you do.
All right. Well, to tell you sort of how I got there, which is not a 25 words or less explanation. So I always have to try to get it down. But I now would characterize myself as being in the business of uniting people, purpose, potential, and profits across the generations at work. And what I mean is I'm really strongly committed to changing the conversation, the tone in this very divisive time we are in, the conversation tone to be more civil, to be respectful, and that people understand each other's perspectives and contribute to their colleagues and both internal and external stakeholders for the betterment of all of us, really. And I came from that. Well, I actually have a master's in urban planning, and I did that for a while. And now later discovered that the demographic part of both of those things, because I'm not an architect or an engineer, so I was, focusing on the people stuff, really relates a lot to the generational things. But I was always drawn to diversity of all kinds and having, people of all ages, in several decades back, we did not have as many kind of identities as we have today. And I celebrate them all. I think that that's wonderful, and people should be able to express them. But I like the energy of young people. Wherever I went around the world, they were attracted to me. And I have so many young friends and have always been very future-oriented. But I was a trailblazer in business development and marketing for professional firms. So I worked with loads of law firms and still do, but law and accounting and so forth. And as time went on, I realized that the younger people were not getting the attention they needed because the senior people were too busy. And in order for them to really develop professionally, to bring in business, which their firms wanted them to do, but didn't give them a lot of help, and also to get them to work with not only more senior people, but even their peers with different specialties. They needed somebody to bring that all together and to also help them to get the resources they needed for management.
Mhm.
So I started next generation programs. And that was very successful. Some of the more senior associates became partners sooner,
Mhm.
started new areas of expertise in their firms. I coached them to go to management to get funding for going to conferences and doing different things like that.
Mhm.
And getting them to go and then report back after they learned something and share it. This was not ever happening before in these firms. And so, management was pleasantly surprised. And from all of this, because people bring all their baggage to whatever it is, I wasn't coaching them about personal things, but that also gets into it. And we've certainly through the pandemic seen that more and more.
Sure.
That I just got fascinated by all things generational and decided in 2005 to really focus on that part. And the business development and marketing was part of that because it's attracting and retaining clients of different generations also. So I have been passionate about that before. Since that. I had always liked the people I worked with and what I was doing, but I never knew what passion felt like at work.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a wonderful thing to discover.
And then it hit me.
Mhm.
So, still over 15 years later and planning to go on forever.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I'm still very passionate about it, but it also got to be more and more the intersections of all other kinds of differences.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you. So what? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming it's going to be management or ownership that's going to bring you in. I mean, obviously, I imagine it's not the lower, the lower associates or the more junior people who are bringing you in. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay.
I mean, it could be the marketing and business development people. It could be the HR people and the variations that are under that now. So, but they're the directors or chiefs of those various things, what we call revenue enablers. I mean,
Right.
they are professionals who often have more education than lawyers do.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true sometimes. Yeah.
and they should not just be called non-lawyers. They hate that, and it's been resented for years.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you. So, what kind of issue are they having, or what kind of pain are they experiencing that leads an ownership group or management or senior level people to say we need to bring Phyllis in?
Well, I mean, now more than ever, firms that never were losing people are losing people.
Mm-hmm.
People are realizing that there are many other things in life that matter, and really reassessing since the pandemic, since they had to really change their lives, had to deal with family situations that they didn't have to deal with before, or they did, but it was different. It wasn't every day, and they weren't all at home together trying to work and learn and do everything that they needed to do. And a lot of, a lot of professionals, you certainly know this, knowing a lot of lawyers, were not thrilled with what they were doing. They liked the money they were making sometimes. They might like the work, or the, specifically more technical work, but the cultures were not very nice in a lot of places.
So I'll say, I think there I'm probably the exception. I love what I do. I love who I get to do it for, and I love who I get to do it with. But I recognize that that's usually the exception.
Yeah, and you are in a small firm, and you have a lot of control.
This is true. This is true.
But
Your name on the door gets you that, right?
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that I'm necessarily comparing them to mega firms,
Mhm.
you know. But
Right.
when you have a lot of people, there are people issues to deal with.
Of course.
Even in a small firm, there's if there are more than two people, or more than one, you have that. But it just multiplies. And it also is something that management, in a lot of cases, and this is not only law, I mean, it's accounting, it's other professions that are
Mhm.
a lot. They never, even founders who were very successful, built their firms, people liked being there, and didn't complain about cultural things. I mean, there's always something,
Right.
but they didn't really think about the HR human side very
Mhm.
much because
Right.
they didn't really have to. And there's become more and more pressure about that. So one of the big issues is that how do we keep people happy enough? How do we keep them engaged?
Mhm.
And it really, it's the connections that have been lost over the last few years just make it worse. When, I don't think that things should be totally remote unless you're in a different city or something like that.
Mhm.
But I've always been for flexibility. In fact, flexibility is sort of the back door of how I got interested in the generational thing. And then I
Mhm.
flipped the umbrella to
Right.
see flexibility under the generational differences, where
Mhm.
not the other way around. But I think we need to do things the way they're done best. And
Right.
it's time to reassess the way we organize work. Is
Mhm.
that the best way there is?
And do you find that that's different from generation to generation? That they think that their different generations want to organize the work differently or organize their work lives differently?
I think it's gotten to be more acute.
Hmm.
I think it was the Gen X women, particularly, who started talking about flexibility
Hmm.
and wanted not to have to be in the office 5 days a week.
Hmm.
And the men were very quiet.
Hmm.
They felt, well, if the women want to be perceived as not as dedicated as they're expected to be, then that's their business. But I'm, not going to speak up about that. And I always said back then, I'm talking here at the end of the 90s and the 2000s, that until the younger men started speaking up and saying what they were telling me as a consultant,
Hmm.
because I was not a threat in that way, that until they started speaking up, things were not going to change for everybody. And it wasn't only young people, you know, the older generations had older parents they had to worry about.
Hmm.
But when you looked at the traditionalists, which are the ones older than the boomers, especially, and the boomers in the beginning, maybe some of them, um, had the men who were in charge, and most of the people. I mean, you had very few women partners,
Hmm.
and not even that many as associates.
Hmm.
But those men had tended to have their wives at home taking care of all those things.
Hmm.
And then as time went on, generation to generation, the women were expecting more. The millennials were a very vocal generation, more so than the Gen Xers, actually.
Hmm.
And certainly Gen Z now, who is just coming into the legal
Right.
profession.
Yeah. And so,
So,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. No, what I was saying was that I know obviously you said it facetiously, but I think that there seems to be a critical realization that people who want flexibility are not looking to be taken less seriously, are not less dedicated to their work, are not less productive, and are not less accomplished. It's just that that's the way that their work life balance or their their responsibilities demand, or even just a preference. I mean, there are people who want flexibility, who are still very driven and very committed to a company. It's just that flexibility is what works best for them. I mean, that it feels like a realization everyone needs to come to.
I mean, not everybody has children or children at home. Or something else that's very important to them.
Mm-hmm.
It is an individual thing, but in some ways, it's like generations are not really defined by birth years.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the political, social, economic, and cultural influences that they shared in common, around usually high school or college age, not when they were toddlers, but even, and especially for the youngest generation,
Mm-hmm.
there is that as toddlers are pretty young because of the terrorism, because of the pandemic, and all of that. But, what are the big influences? And so besides, so that's, when you were born is one thing, but it's also what geographic area, what part of the world. Did you come from a progressive family or a very conservative one or religious?
Right.
What life stages you're in. All of those things, and they could be totally different ages. Or two people could have the exact same birthday. They were friends working in an office. One gets promoted to be managing the other one. They're going to look at things differently then too.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, I think we've done a great. I love what you've said about sort of the problem is and the issues are. When you go into one of these companies and you're either you're brought in as a consultant, what's your assessment process in terms of identifying what issues are in that particular company that relate to either cultural communication or cross-generational issues?
I do a lot of interviewing of people.
Okay.
And not only the management level, because you have to hear from them, but at all kinds of levels.
Okay.
So I think you have to let everybody into the conversation.
And those conversations, I imagine, kind of reveal to you what issues are, perhaps not even necessarily obvious, but are kind of lurking below the surface at a particular company.
And I believe very strongly in cross-generational conversation. I do. Cross-generational conversation day. It's the subtitle of one of my books. You can't Google it. A compelling case for cross-generational conversation at work. I think we need those. And so much of what especially the younger people are missing now with all this remoteness, whether it's enforced or mandatory because of health reasons or whatever it might be. They're missing out so much by not having these conversations and developing relationships with people. It's not impossible over Zoom, but it's not the same. I mean, I think you got to admit that the energy is not the same. The connection is not the same. Especially, I mean, you can do it after you meet somebody in person and you talk with them a while and you feel comfortable. But, it's really a big problem, which is why I'm against 5 days, if you can actually make it into some more central space. It's a very complex problem.
It is.
Because people, getting their schedules coordinated so that you have the people you need at the same time and giving everybody the space and psychological safety, which is another big thing that I'm focusing on.
I think it's very interesting. I've had a client I was speaking to recently, and he said, "Well, we're going to a model where our senior people are going to be remote, and they can come in if they want, and the junior people are required to be in the office." And we talked it through. It's like, what do you think about that? And we're kind of strategizing about it because he was trying to get my perspective, having 20 years plus in the business, kind of seeing how all of these things work. And I said, well, one of the biggest issues you're going to have is no one's around to train the more junior people. I said, you've got them all in the office, and there's a lot of kind of peer training that can go on, but that mentorship is what you're missing. You're missing that hands-on. You're missing the incidental relationships that happen when you're walking to get a cup of coffee and find somebody in the kitchen you talk to for 3 minutes. That's to me is sort of lost over Zoom, and it's a challenge that a lot of my clients are dealing with. Of some people want to be remote, some people want to be in the office, some people have moved out of town and now want to work from a different location. So I completely agree with you that flexibility and assessing what issues there are that need to be addressed and everybody needs to be heard is really important.
Right. And I think there's a lot of focus now, hopefully more than lip service, on DEI, but the really important diversity and equity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. But the fourth digit there, which is B, I think, in some ways is even more important. I mean, you have to have inclusion is not enough. You can have somebody there.
Right.
You've hired them and they've got a role and all of that. But if they don't feel like they're belonging, and that's one of the reasons we're having so much in the way of issues of race and the many genders that there are, and any kind of difference, disabilities, if people feel they're not seen or given the choice to do or the opportunity to be able to do more.
I think that's a really interesting point, that it's not enough to be diverse and equitable and inclusive. The people who are being included need to feel like they belong. I mean, I think they need to have that for a sense of culture and community in a company. It's not enough to just diversify for the sake of diversification or because you feel like you have to. It should be something that really creates that kind of culture where everybody feels that they belong. I like that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's when they'll be really engaged and go the extra mile. It's a cliche.
Yeah, it is, but I think it does. It's a cliche for a reason, right?
Yeah, and it's the reason for a lot of burnout. People get burnout from overwork, but if they really like what they're doing and the people that they're with and feel connected, they don't get burned out. I mean, it doesn't go that far, and it doesn't get into mental illness. It's not that level of anxiety.
Right. You mentioned you can't Google it, and give us that subtitle again, because I love the title. I love the you can't Google it. What's the rest of that title?
Yeah, it's my website name too. You can't Google it. The compelling case for cross-generational conversation at work. And it really looks at what I call the 10 essential skills or traits for success that you can't get by doing a Google search or going on the internet, but that you can only learn, acquire, practice by developing relationships through conversations. And so it looks through the lens of 5 different generations at I won't name all 10 of them, but perspective, trust and empathy, curiosity, conversation, high touch personalization, reciprocity, and so on.
Okay, well, I'll certainly link to the book so people can find it when we post the show. There was another book I think that I saw that you had written.
The other one, the ABA, American Bar Association, asked me to write a book on generations, which I wasn't looking to do at the time. I had just finished the other one. I'm supposed to be marketing that one.
Right. But I
but
guess when the ABA comes calling, you don't want to say no.
no, that wasn't the problem.
Oh, okay.
But it, what was going on in my personal life at the time, my husband was very ill,
Oh,
and
sorry.
I was not able to really travel and do so. I was working, but there, and so I decided, okay, I can write. I mean,
Okay.
I can write easily, but
Sure. That's great.
I much rather be out with people. I just really love that. It's very hard what we've been through the last few years.
Right.
2 weeks ago, I did my first in-person in a law firm program in all that time. I mean, since everything closed down and they weren't letting people in. And
Right.
people asked me, were you feeling awkward and all that? And I said, no, I love it.
Yes.
I had to travel
It's nice to get out from
to
behind the
get
screen,
there.
right? It's different.
Yeah, I love it. So anyway, that book, who's going to bring it here so you can even see the cover? But that one is all checklists. It's all action steps, and it's everything that lawyers and law firms, might be looking into, not from the technical side, but everything. It's called Embrace Gengagement, and that Gengagement is spelled with GEN. Engagement.
Yeah.
That's one of my trademark words.
I like
And
that.
so there's, I mean, you can dip into it for action steps on all kinds of things, whether it's starting conversations, what different generations want to be talking about. There's actually, it was before Gen Z was in the workplace. Well, it came out about a year and a half ago, maybe by now. So it was, right about the time that the pandemic was hitting, but before it was written before that, and how to prepare for this next generation, and that they were very different than the millennials, and what you could learn from them, and all of that. So yeah. I mean,
So what? Yeah. Go ahead.
it's all right. Go ahead. I
I
don't
was
know.
just saying that, short of, obviously, reading your book is obviously a great start, and obviously reaching out to you. But are there actions that companies can take, tomorrow, or I guess tomorrow's Saturday, but maybe Monday, to to kind of begin this assessment of the issues that they might have, or to begin those conversations? Because I imagine there are many workplaces where those cross-generational conversations and considerations are really just not happening.
No, they're not happening. And one of the well, there are two main reasons, I think, or at least important reasons. One of them is that management doesn't give people time. And they think that's not as important as whatever else they'll be doing, but it saves time if you do it up front. Just like if you have somebody reporting to you and they come with a document and it's not in your style, or you don't think they did a good job, if you redo it, instead of giving it back to them and telling them, training them as to how you want it and how it should be,
Right.
it's only going to happen again.
Every time.
And you're going to be, or you're going to be doing that work, which you delegated to them. And so you're not getting it off your plate, and they're not learning anything.
Right. You're not developing them as
And
professionals.
it's the same way about not having conversations up front to get to know people, to work things out, to feel at ease, to have conversations when there's a conflict, which is difficult, no doubt, but you've been trained to do that with clients. You got to do it with your colleagues as well. So that reaching out and not only giving permission, but encouragement and from from the people who are going to, determine how your career goes,
Right. Yeah.
is very important. And the
Mhm.
other thing is that a lot of people are uncomfortable reaching out to people that they haven't worked with before,
Mhm.
or they, feel are different from them in some way.
Mhm.
But it gets easier once you start doing it. And
Mhm.
and in order to do that and get a good response, you have to learn how to ask good questions.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I was like, yeah, you
And
can.
as any litigator would know, but not,
Mhm.
in all kinds of practices,
Sure.
that's essential.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
and
now,
essentially, I
yeah,
mean, in my transactional practice, it's essential
yeah,
because if I don't
yeah,
ask the right questions of the clients and I don't get that information from them, the advice can't be as good. So I do 25 years or 20 years of learning of what it is I need to know. And because people don't necessarily present to you what you need to know, sometimes you have to kind of go digging for it.
yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes they don't even really know what their problems are. So
Exactly. That's the probing you
yeah,
have to do, right? I mean, whether
we
it's
gotta
you
find
going in as a consultant or me going in as a lawyer, you have to kind of probe and ask those questions and look under the hood a little bit.
absolutely.
And that's as much as
And
I know about cars.
I do. Me too. So yeah, not just yes or no questions, which can you stop the conversation,
Hmm.
but things that will reveal some information
Hmm.
and get people talking, and then they loosen up more and more, and showing an interest in them as people.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And as the connection has been broken, unfortunately. Externally, we didn't want the pandemic, we don't want wars, we don't want all these kinds of things,
Sure.
but it's going to take some effort. But people have to do it, they have to be encouraged, and they have to be rewarded for that, uh,
Hmm.
and not necessarily paid for having, monetarily,
Right.
for having a conversation,
Hmm.
but recognized for it
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
encouraged. And that's really going to improve the the cultures and make people feel better. There are a lot of people who are leaving and going somewhere else, and they may say it's for more money, although that more money comes in fourth or fifth usually in the
Hmm.
surveys now. But if they really like where they are, feel comfortable, and feel this is aligned with my values,
Hmm.
and I have a purpose here that I understand, and it's being explained to me why I'm being asked to do some things, even if I
Hmm.
don't find them as challenging or as pleasant
Right.
as I like. If it's
Hmm.
meaningful, if I can see what the benefit is,
Right.
it just changes really the
It does.
whole
Yeah, it,
thing.
it does. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So Phyllis, you've given us so much great information and so many things, a lot of food for thought, because I think there are a lot of issues that
I'm
you
glad.
focused your career on that not everybody's thinking about. And I see it with my own clients where the focus sometimes is on, just plow forward and we'll get it done. And, it doesn't matter whether everybody's happy. Let's just put the oars in the water in a row. And, then I see them with other issues down the road where it's like, well, we've lost our senior people, or we've lost the junior people, or, it's just so difficult to get things done because we're having issues. We're not even sure what they are. So I think you've given everybody a lot to think about.
Well,
I love
I'm
to ask the same. I love to ask the same final question because I think there's so much people can learn from it. So, what's one thing that you've learned kind of along your journey or along the way that you wish you'd known earlier?
um I guess I mean, if we start way back,
Hmm.
the importance of networking, because that wasn't talked about as much in the boomer days.
Sure.
Well, I mean, it was, but not when we were 20.
Right.
and now people are given mentors and talk about the importance of networking before they even enter college, if they're going to
Right.
college.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's one of them. And I guess developing ease in reaching out to people. This is, I guess, related to networking too.
Sure. Yeah.
That are in person. I was always able to do that. I
Mhm.
think it was the telephone that I found my third least or my third best way of communicating. In
Mhm.
person was number one, writing
Right.
was number two.
Mhm.
So I think that is really important, and the mentoring of others. I do a lot of mentoring, and how much gratification and how much you can learn
Mhm.
as the mentor, and and doing mutual mentoring, that it shouldn't all go one way, or
Mhm.
having a mentoring circle where you
Yeah.
can draw on many people.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Uh,
Well, tell everybody where they can find you, learn more about you, and get in touch with you.
all right, thank you for that
Of course.
opportunity. So I'll even give you my email address, which is PWHASEROT. See my name there,
Mhm.
at PD Counsel, and that's COUNSEL.com.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, not the other kind of counsel that is,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
pdcounsel.com. My
Wonderful.
LinkedIn, please connect with me,
Mhm.
is in PW Haserot.
Okay.
Uh,
Wonderful.
and yeah, I'm on Twitter and all of that, but I'm of social media more active in LinkedIn than the others. I love, and my website, you can't Google it.com,
Mhm.
which has loads of information. And if you want to be on my newsletters, I have a free newsletter. Um, it comes out monthly, so I don't bombard you too often.
Mhm.
But yeah, I have a lot of free resources. I love answering questions. So
Wonderful.
if you contact me, I will respond.
That's beautiful. That's really, really lovely. So I will certainly include the email address and all of those links to your books and to your website so that everybody can contact you and reach out and continue the conversation because it's been a really great one. So, Phyllis,
Well,
thank you so much.
may I just give one quick challenge to
Absolutely.
your, okay,
Please,
because it's
please
related
do.
to what we've been talking about.
Sure.
Um, Find 3 people that you do not know very well that
Mhm.
you work with,
Okay.
and reach out to them to have a conversation and to get to know them better.
Mhm.
And then develop the relationship from there, assuming that goes well.
Mhm.
And after those 3, go on to the next.
Mhm.
And let me know how it goes.
That sounds like a
I
great. That sounds like a
promise
great
you
place.
that you will be glad to make those connections.
That sounds wonderful. Sounds like a great challenge and a great place to end. So thank you, Phyllis. This has been terrific.
My pleasure. I look forward to speaking again.
Absolutely.